For better picture quality, adjust tracking control on your VCR.
Showtime, man. Showtime.
The National Football League. The meek will never inherit this turf. It is a world ruled by brute force and specialized technique. There is no room for the faint of heart.
Let's go, killer. This ain't gonna be no place for women and children now, I tell you.
While the game continually evolves, the physical intensity remains unchanged. After more than 6 decades, pro football is still 11 men pursuing one man who is trying to get the ball across the goal line. In this violent world, all men are not created equal.
The players that you talk about that are the real hitters, they just enjoy hitting.
They are guys that want to leave an impression. They would like to leave a Radel across someone's chest.
The effect that I would like is for a player to be able to get up and go back to the huddle and say, I don't want to go back that way. I don't ever want to do that again.
This is the story of 6 of the most ferocious hit men who ever played pro football. Athletes whose ability to deal out punishment put them in the game spotlight and made each game day crunch time. The Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, one of the world's most celebrated sports venues. For 5 decades, an international showcase for athletic achievement. Everything from Super Bowls to Olympiads. But today, it belongs to the Los Angeles Raiders. No team in professional sports intimidates opponents more effectively. And no member of this team is more relentless in his intimidation than defensive lineman Howie Long.
The Raiders, I'd show up at camp. They didn't ask me to bench any weight. They didn't ask me to do any vertical jumps. They didn't ask me to do any broad jumps. They didn't ask me to hop in a think tank and see how my bad dreams were. They gave me a helmet, you're going to play defensive line, and I started to play. I didn't know how to get to the quarterback, so my one move was just come off the ball and run everyone over. And if that didn't work, I tried to fight them. But they called me caveman because they just liked the way I attacked people. My background in football knowledge was so limited that they would be going over terminology such as out of east eye right, triple slot left. And immediately I started looking around the room like, you know, is anyone else picking this stuff up? You know, or am I the only one that's not getting this? And it turns out I was like the only one that wasn't getting it. They had to literally take me from square one to where I am now.
A surprise second-round draft choice from Villanova has matured into the game's most menacing defensive presence.
When you start to draw up plays, you are conscious of where he is. And you are conscious of saying, we have to do something about this guy or he may destroy what we're trying to do in the game.
He's used it left defensive end, left defensive tackle, nose tackle, right defensive tackle, right defensive end. The most dominant force in defensive football today.
No one is immune to his greatness. For long attacks from all 5 defensive line positions.
Instead of one offensive lineman preparing for me, all 5 have to prepare for me. They never know where I'm coming from.
He has that knack of gathering himself and getting into the offensive blocker and at the same time continuing to move toward the quarterback. A lot of defensive linemen start playing games with the offensive tackle and they don't make progress toward the quarterback. But everything that Howie Long does is done toward the quarterback.
The ultimate team player, Long often ties up a trio of enemy pass blockers to make way for a teammate.
As long as I hear Matt Millen on the tackle or Bill Pickell on the tackle or Sean Jones on the tackle, as long as someone is making the tackle and it's not for a big gain, then I can get up from the bottom of the pile and figure I did my job. You can be a total player and an unselfish player and not necessarily a big statistical player and be a success and be considered to be one of the best at what you do.
Here's the rush. He's hit as he throws. Intercepted by Stacy Colan, the 25, the 30, the 40, the side 50, down to the 40, down to the 30. Nobody close. All the way. Touchdown Raiders!
But hard-nosed Howie is not without a sense of humor. Take, for example, the time he invaded the Seattle Seahawks offensive huddle and walked off with their water bottle.
I was a bit frustrated, and our water boys are like, you know, the rest of the team. They're just, you know, they were probably talking to someone up in the stands during the timeout, and we hadn't gotten any water out. So I walked into their huddle and took their water from their water boy and said, you know, give me that bottle. They really don't deserve it. They haven't done anything today. You know, it was all in a joke, really. You know, I mean, they kind of liked it.
For Howie Long, the thrill of the kill is secondary to the challenge of the chase.
I haven't seen many quarterbacks maiming people, so, you know, I think they're kind of an afterthought. I think the justification and the real moment of glory is when you beat that man in front of you to get to the quarterback. And if a quarterback's not too squirmy about it, I really don't try to hit him that hard. I'm not a violent type of person, you know. I appall violence. It just makes me ill. It's right up there with beats. Ugh. I really just don't like violence, but, you know, sometimes, you know, they hit that switch, you know, and it just, I get that kind of, they call it Howie time. My teammates call it Howie time, you know, and I kind of get that faraway look where I see through people.
When Howard Long lapses into his particular brand of tunnel vision, the There's rarely any light at the end of it for Raider opponents.
He's a guy that you hate to play against him, but from a coach's standpoint, you admire the guy and just wish he was on your football team.
Elway setting up, big rush coming. He's buried for the third sacking of the day, might have fumbled. He did. Raiders recovered. Raiders recovered. Elway was just snowed under. There was too much defensive push.
If you take everything into consideration, both run and pass, Howie Long's the best defensive lineman in football.
Howie Long, quintessential crunch time.
The key to it is hustle. If I don't hustle as much as I should have during a game, I go home at night and I really, really lose a lot of sleep over it. I like to think of myself as being relentless. You know, I like to be thought of as being that way, relentless. I like that word.
Pat Fisher stood 5 feet 9 inches and weighed 165 pounds and was as good an acorn as you could find at a time when NFL teams were looking for oaks. The Cardinals drafted him out of Nebraska in 1961. And after a brief tryout as a receiver, number 37 became their left cornerback, a position he owned for 7 years. He was a small but angry tornado that whirled out and whacked anyone who approached the funnel.
He had perfect form. He had great form. And I think his height helped him because he was able to get down there and get down below you. Instead of hitting your chest, he hit down where you could hit and lift.
Fisher reduced the art of tackling to a simple matter of angles and leverage.
Stay low, keep my head up. When I make contact, lift, and take at least one of his legs away from him. If I can get him off the ground with one leg, I'm going to win the war. Because now he doesn't have any power. What he has to have is both legs driving in order for him to run over me.
Traded to the Redskins in 1975, no player ran over number 37. But even in Washington, his skirmishes with backs and receivers were part of a 17-year running battle for respect.
Pat couldn't have been 5'9", 170 at tops. That's what if they wrapped him up in a lot of tape.
And I was 6'5" and a little bit more, and Coach Lombardi used to always say, well, this is like taking candy from a baby.
Pat Fisher shows that size and speed is not necessarily the #1 requisite for a football player. Never missed a practice, never missed a game, played 110%. He was as tough as nails, loved the game, tremendous competitor.
That first game was a pretty good experience for me because, you know, I got out there and he started talking to me and he intimidated me. Threatened to break my leg, this, that, you know. He was probably the one guy that I've ever played against in professional football where when you came off the line of scrimmage, you had to know where he was at.
Fisher was fearless and tenacious. Many players have these qualities, but few could shape it into such a frightening and unrelenting force. From whistle to gun, he beat on, agitated, outwitted, and intimidated receivers. He was the pepper in the Redskins stew.
Distraction is the key to why you want to intimidate. Make them think about you. Make them know and realize that if they do catch the ball, they're going to have to pay the penalty for it. And over a period of time, the war will be won by the guy that's more aggressive.
Fisher's most famous duels were fought with the Eagles' Harold Carmichael, number 17, an oak who outsized the acorn by 50 pounds and 11 inches.
Throw through the receiver to the ball. And in that case, with Harold Carmichael, it was always proved to be a valuable instrument. Go through him to the ball. Go through him to the ball. If you want to run inside, you may catch it, and you may get the first down, but I'm going to have to hit you. I'm going to have to punish you for doing it. And that's the rule.
Few could deny their admiration for this toy terrier who kept nipping at their heels. His peers respected this man of spirit and spunk, for they realized that few players had mined the ore of their talent so completely.
Pat Fisher was not that fast, not that big, but he had a heart, loved the game, smart football player. Should be an all-pro, should be in the Hall of Fame someday.
Pat Fisher packed such intensity into every play, focused his talent with such skill, aged with such grace, that he played more games at cornerback than any player in NFL history. In this modern and glamorous age of pro football, Randy White is a reminder of its primitive past. Here in the setting, he is an inspired amateur hoping to land the big one. But on a football field where he is weighed and measured on a different scale, White never comes up short.
Many times people fall into two categories. Those who say, I'll do my best, and those who say, I'll be the best. And Randy White, whether he's ever professed it or not, wants to be the best. The drive that he has to be the best player is obvious the way he practices, the way he plays the game.
I want Randy White! I want Randy White! All right, Randy!
He does not accept defeat. He does not accept the fact that he cannot make the play. He just believes and plays as if he personally can make any play that has to be made, and he does.
While White strides resolutely on his way to the Hall of Fame, in 1975 he followed in the footsteps of a player whose bust was already being cast. For 14 years, Bob Lilly commanded center stage in Dallas, and to assume his role, a replacement would have to sneak in from the wing. A rookie rarely plays leading man roles, but number 54 displayed instincts that were perfectly geared to the closed-in crunch of pro football.
My attitude was defeat the guy in front of me and get the guy with the ball, whether it was a running back or the quarterback. I really didn't preoccupy myself with the little steps, the little intricacies of playing the flex defense.
The Cowboys tried White at linebacker. And although opponents fell like buildings from a wrecking ball swing, the conversion was like making over Marie Osmond into Madonna.
I was one of those guys at Dallas that really felt like he should be a middle linebacker because I had played against Dick Butkus, and Randy White to me was the closest thing to Dick Butkus that I'd ever seen, and he could outrun Dick Butkus. He had that mean streak in him that Dick Butkus had.
White allows no interruptions, no distractions, no loitering. The scrimmage line is his domain to be possessed and defended, a place where he sends ferocious messages to all corners of that unique world known as pro football.
The thing that makes Randy White so great is that he never treats anybody different. I don't care whether you're playing the best football player as an offensive line or the worst one. He doesn't care. I mean, he's going to play them the same way every week. And when you have that kind of a player, you're going to have a player that's going to dominate.
You just cannot go into a game without accounting for his presence. You may have a player that will play well against him one time, but over the long haul, you're going to have to account for him with more than one player, and that's the ultimate in respect that a player can get from the opposition.
Randy White, to me, would have to be the finest defensive lineman, along with Deacon Jones, that I've ever seen play football.
Randy White is a player that plays every play, whether the game is 70-0 in your favor or 70-0 against you.
He's got the motor. He never stops. He never thinks he's out of a play. He's going to try and win the game himself if he can. I don't even care what everybody else is doing, and he inspires everybody else by his play, I think, and he's got a great heart, great pride.
It's like the last play of the game, and it's up to him to make the play to win the game.
As the game progresses, you fall into a pattern. You see certain things that you'll be able to do, and you kind of save them for a key situation when it can mean a big play for your team, maybe on a pass rush, a certain move that you can use to beat a guy and you think it'll work.
Big play, Stabler to throw. Here comes the pressure. Shot! And the ball! Football! It is a touchdown!
Randy White ball, Stabler, and the ball came loose. It has never been easy for a lineman to achieve glory in a sport where romance thrives on dazzling runs and long passes. A few like Randy White have risen from the gore of the scrimmage line to become giants of pro football.
I remember walking up to the line of scrimmage, and I looked to the left and started calling a signal, and looked to the right and started calling the rest of the signal, and I looked straight ahead. And here's the man that you fear most in football staring you right in the face. What he said to me, I can't repeat. The sensors would have a ball, and immediately my voice kind of quivered and started cracking.
He was the greatest intimidator that ever played football. I don't know how good a football player was. He scared the hell out of people long.
He told me he was going to kick my, you know what, the first time I ever played against him, my rookie year.
Dick was an animal. I called him a maniac, a stone maniac.
He's the kind of linebacker that when he hit our back would go back in the huddle. He'd be talking out his ear hole. He'd want to know who was supposed to block that crazy sucker.
Before you could begin to try to block on Dick, you had to overcome the mystique. And he didn't appreciate this, but I said it was almost like an odor. He exuded a kind of a presence.
He tried to hurt you. You know, he was just so competitive. You know, not only did he not want you to gain a yard, he didn't want you to gain an inch. You know, as soon as you had that football, you were the enemy.
Dick Butkus played football with a religious fervor, with an unrelenting obsession not only to excel, but to dominate and demoralize.
Dick was not satisfied with just an ordinary tackle. He had to hit you, pick you up, drive you, and grind you into the ground.
For Dick Butkus, football was never a game, but a street fight, a place for no-holds-barred warfare.
He was an animal, and he was a well-conditioned animal, and every time he hit you, he tried to put you in the cemetery, not the hospital.
Butkus was the most destructive defender in the game. And the NFL is filled with horror stories of tough men who crossed it.
He knocked out L.C. Greenwood on a punt. I remember, and he knocked out Warren Banks, and he was a backup fullback. We had a good special teams player. And I remember Warren sitting on the sideline crying. He says, "I don't know who I am," because Butkus had blindsided and just KO'd him.
For Dick to run a 100-yard dash, it'd take him 3 days. But I want to tell you something, from that middle linebacker, 20 yards this way, 20 yards that way, 20 yards that way. I mean, nobody was quicker than he was. He made a lot of interceptions. If he was told in past defenses to be in a certain area, I mean, he was there. He had great hands. The man was unbelievable. His whole damn life was football. Forget about it. Wasn't driving a pretty car. It wasn't going to the local bar and pounding your chest, I'm the greatest. It was the opposite.
You know, I'm really not the tough, macho guy that was only during the game, and no matter how hard you try to explain that, sure you were, you know. So
he's basically a pain in the ass. You know, again, I know him, and he's got a personality like a fried lobster.
It was horrifying playing against him because he can intimidate literally an entire offensive team, and I mean good teams.
We had a rookie center that was playing against him for the first time. And of course, you remember Butkus grunted a lot and growled a lot when he was backing up the line. And we sent this rookie center in to play for us. And the first time he came off, his eyes were about like this. He couldn't believe what he was hearing from Butkus. Butkus had him intimidated. He hadn't even blocked him yet.
Butkus dominated a game the way no other player ever has. He dominated officials. He'd take the ball away from the guy after the play and shake it in the official's face, and the official would point it their way. It was awesome.
I was working, and Butkus came up to me, and he started to wave his finger at me. I sort of smiled at him and I said, Butkus, I said, don't wave your finger at me. I said, I'll bite your head off. He looked at me and said, well, if you bite my head off, you'll have more brains in your stomach than you will have in your head.
He was the most unique defensive player that I ever saw come into professional football. The first year that he began to play, he began to do things to runners that no one had ever done before. In that he was tackling these guys with one hand and stripping them with the other, stripping them of the ball. I've never seen any linebacker in professional football before or since who did this.
Dick Butkus recovered 25 opponents' fumbles, the second highest total in NFL history. And if records were kept of fumbles forced, he would certainly own the all-time mark.
Butkus, he just scared me to death. I didn't know if I could play this game after watching him because the ball would snap, and if he was pursuing, I mean, every word was a cuss word, man. He was growling, let me at him, you know.
He's talking all the time out there. He raised more hell on the field and got away with more stuff than any player I ever played against.
He'd jump right up over the center and just scream and holler and everything else, and every once in a while he'd go and put a big honker right on the football, right? He'd spit on Tingelhoff's hands or something, you know, and Tingelhoff would be snapping that ball back up to Fran, and he'd be getting a greaser.
Nice, sunshiny, bright day, and we were playing, and we'd scored a touchdown, and I got up, and in the center, you know, puts his hands on the ball, and then he looks between his legs to the holder, and all of a sudden, I thought he had a downpour out there, you know, and a nice clear day, and I look up, and there's Butkus spitting all over my hands.
Here we go, Andy. All right, we shift a 44 to a 56 stand. Pow! Watch the play action. Let's go.
Butkus was a crafty signal caller who utilized methods both extreme and unusual in pursuit of success.
It's illegal for a middle linebacker or a signal caller to say hut. They can talk and call defensive signals and that, but Dick didn't understand that rule, and he's always saying hut, hut, and the ref would warn him, and he said, that's my signal to my linebacker, which is bull. They don't have any signal like that. He's talking all the time, and laughing and carrying on and try to get you in a conversation and to disrupt your game. What he's doing.
Well, I got a letter, supposedly from a doctor, I think, from somewhere, and I don't know wherever, but he just claimed that if this is the way football is going to be played or something, I'm not going to let my kid play it or whatever, and he signed his name and everything else. So I wrote back to him and I says, well, you know something, You doctors, I think I'm going to discourage my wife from watching the soaps during the daytime because, boy, you know, you guys are having affairs with the nurses and the patients and everything else, and I just don't want to subject my wife to this because if this is what you guys portray, I don't think it's a very good thing to have my wife watching me like this.
He was not the type of guy that you say, we're going to get this loudmouth. No, you didn't do that. But before you played him, the first thing you said on your offensive game plan is, hey, how are we going to handle Butkus?
In 1970, Butkus' knees were damaged so badly that his doctor told him to retire. But the joy of battle was too sharp for anything to spoil his pleasure. He played on for 3 more years. A wounded grizzly fighting off a pack of vengeful bounty hunters.
He had the bad knee, and he was just not himself. You know, he couldn't play, but we killed him anyway, you know. And he was screaming at me, saying, you can blank this out, one. You man, so you son of a he said, you cheap shot. The whole game he's yelling at me, and I'd just laugh. I'd go out and I'd cut him, you know, I'd blindside him next. I'd go looking for him. I was going out of my way. I almost get called flags because I wanted to kill him, you know. I still didn't have any pity on him, but the son of a still won the game for him.
A philosopher once defined a great man as someone who never reminds us of anyone else. Few athletes can match that criteria, but Dick Butkus is one of them. Butkus retired in 1973, leaving behind a monumental yet simple legacy, as clear and concise as his very name.
Butkus is synonymous with football. It's synonymous with hitting, contact, aggressiveness. He's the best who ever played the position.
Dick Butkus is the greatest football player I ever saw. I'm convinced he's the greatest football player that ever lived.
Under the midday sun, the light of battle shone brightly in the eyes of Mad Dog Mike Curtis. Number 32 had 11 years of head-on collisions and won almost every one of them. He was a relentless tracker of pass receivers, runners, and quarterbacks. The Mad Dog had all the hunger and hardness a man ever needed to drive him to the top. And he was named to the All-Pro team in only his second season. It was ironic that this future Hall of Fame linebacker came to the Colts at a different position.
Mike Curtis was a great football player that I drafted out of Duke University. And to show you how smart I was, I brought him in and made him a fullback. And after the first year, it was very evident that Mike Curtis was not an offensive player, he was a defensive player.
As a fuzz-cheeked rookie fullback, the first hint of Curtis's fierce nature surfaced in a pregame incident with Baltimore star quarterback Johnny Unitas.
I played fullback, and I remember I didn't turn around at the line of scrimmage to catch a ball, and he just rifled the ball in the back of my helmet. Well, it angered me so much that I almost went back and decided to do something about it. But then I remembered I was a rookie and I couldn't do that because he's got a great ball player. But I almost punched him out.
We used to say that Mike could come out and chew the tires off the bus on the way to the game. I mean, he was a pretty vicious football player.
never has a man been unhappier the day of a game than he would just get beside himself. He hated the Doris Day, the American flag, black and white saddle Oxfords, his own teammates. He had the disposition of a Highland moccasin.
The one thing that would always get me excited was if anybody had anything to say to me. And nobody really talked to me too much because I would look them up throughout the field, wherever the ball was, chase them down, and then ask them if they had something else smart to say. You got something else smart to say? They got something else, I'd chase them down again. I'd just screw up my plays. And every once in a while, in my zest to get to the ball carrier, I forgot, well, you don't have to quite take that angle, or you don't have to do it quite that way, because you have to cover this position. And I would think of that as I was running, then I'd run back and try to get back. So I had a double move, and then I'd go flying up there out of control to try to kill somebody.
Rage was a part of Curtis' anatomy. Like a muscle, he flexed it and built it up. He was called a madman in cleats, a notion that was played up by the sporting press.
Here I am, I'm just working hard, trying to do a good job from playing with it. You're wrong. There's got to be something. Nobody plays like that unless there's some nutbag. Well, I said, okay, if they want something, I'll tell them something. So I made up these stories. I got a great thrill of running my bike into brick walls. God, that's great stuff. So that went out, and we had these great BB gun fights. You know, we aimed at each other's eyes. Really? Yeah, shoot all the time. We always had those things.
What was not fiction was Curtis's intensity and desire. Characteristics that brought out the madness in his method.
And if Mike meant for his body to get 14 hours of sleep, then by golly, he would grasp the bed for 14 hours and stay in a posture. And I knew when he was asleep and when he wasn't. He might be awake for 8 of those hours. But if I put on deodorant or dropped the coat hanger, what did I do? I'm trying to get my rest.
He was a lawman on the field, and his brand of frontier justice was meted out vividly in a game against the Dolphins.
We're winning. Our momentum is significantly better than Miami's. And here comes Mr. Fan, who wants to join in the momentum. Oh, I don't know but anyway, he's smashed. So he comes running out on the field, great lark, picks up the ball. When I saw him pick it up, I immediately ran over there and knocked him down. Not to hurt him, but to knock him down, get the ball back, get in the game, get rid of his rear end, period. I didn't think it was a joke that I was working out there. A lot of other guys might think it's a joke to see a fan run out there. To me, it was my job.
And after the game, 2 or 3 of us were angry. Bubba Smith and I went to Mike. We said, you shouldn't have done that, Mike. You make us all look bad. He said, that guy broke a city ordinance, and I enforced it. And if he comes back out there again, I'll hit him again.
He was a little to the right of Attila the Hun.
Well, Mike is somewhere to the right of Mussolini in his political views.
Somebody gave me a doll of John Wayne, the Duke, Mr. All-America, he. So I got him in my office there.
In Baltimore, Curtis was a hero bigger than any movie star. And like John Wayne Westerns, all action became secondary to the final shootout.
Barking his counts, takes it away without a fake, rolling to his left side, sets up, and is going to be swarmed under. The ball is free. Baltimore's got it. Racing for the goal line is Mike Curtis. He's to the 15, 10, 5. Curtis scores. Go to war, Miss Agnes. Baltimore's defense just took the ball away from Cap.
He led by deeds rather than words. But like the commercial says, when he spoke, everybody listened.
All team meetings are a bunch of we-goners. And Mike stood up and said, well, I got something to say. I'm going to tell you something. We're going to win the rest of our games. He said, we got 3 games left in the season, then we got 2 playoff games, and then we got the Super Bowl. That's 6 games. I'm going to play the same way I always play. And everybody in this room is going to go full speed all the time in practice and in the game. Because if you don't, I'm going to whip your butt myself. Remember, I said that, and he sat down, and we won all 6 games.
Although Mike Curtis left a history of hard hits, championships, and all-pro seasons in Baltimore, his lasting legacy is his image.
Mike Curtis, you animal, you! Mad dog!
Mike Curtis, the Mad Dog, a hard-hat hero, a warrior. The Thunder in the great Miami Dolphins teams of the early 1970s was number 39, fullback Larry Csonka.
When all else fails and it's obvious it's going to come down to a direct physical confrontation, I always thought it reflected a higher degree of intelligence to do the inflicting first. I was out into the open field where it was a man in the secondary. Obviously, I'd have an extreme size and weight advantage. Generally, they were looking for a side shot rather than a head-on shot, simply because of the ratio of size, weight, so on. Very often, if you would cut back directly into them, that element of surprise would completely discombobulate whatever they were trying to put together. And you'd be able to not only avoid the tackle, but lay in some devastating blows. I liked that style. I won't hide that. I preferred to run inside. My playing weight went from 235 in the early 70s to 250 or 255 in the latter part of the 70s because I was running inside. And it was kind of fun to meet head on. When I won, it was very rewarding. I didn't like it when I lost that battle.
Csonka's lost confrontations were often as breathtaking as the many battles that he won. Drafted first by Miami in 1968, it wasn't until 1970 and the arrival of new head coach Don Shula that this down and dirty runner began leaving his impact on the NFL. Shula quickly found ways to exploit the Zonk's speed and quickness, both of which were uncommon in a runner so large. And not since the days of Bronco Nagurski had the NFL experienced a runner with such punishing tackle-breaking power.
Even if you had an open shot to hit him as hard as you could hit him, I always had the sense that I got the worst of the deal.
I can remember some shots that I took on him one-on-one, and, I couldn't bring him down. You need help.
It's like trying to catch a runaway truck on an incline. When you see a bus and you put it on the side of a hill and you didn't put your emergency brake on it and it starts to roll, you should know you're trying to grab it and there's no way.
Larry Csonka was a defensive back's worst nightmare, but he was a coach's dream.
As a football coach, it's tough to get attached to somebody on a personal basis, but it's tough not to get attached to a guy like Larry Csonka. To know him is to love him. A guy with a great sense of humor, and on game day, one of the toughest football players that I've ever been around.
I think Larry had 12 or 13 broken noses over his career, and from week to week, it was you had to guess which side of his face his nose would be lying on.
I don't know why you bring my nose up. Is there something wrong with my nose?
He liked a little bit of blood dripping off his nose. He liked to look down and see himself filthy dirty because he now knows that he's playing the game. He's into it the way that he likes to be. And the bigger the game, the better this guy played.
In 1971, Larry Csonka personally carried the Dolphins to victory in the longest game in NFL history. 1 year later, Csonka's unrelenting power propelled the Dolphins to a victory over the Redskins in Super Bowl VII and a perfect 17-0 season. In 1973, Csonka capped off the Dolphins' second straight world championship by earning Most Valuable Player honors for Super Bowl VIII. Throughout his career, Csonka played fullback like a horse plows a field. doggedly with a high pain threshold and with great determination.
But I took a lot of pride in being a power running back. I think had I not had that little bit of speed and body control or whatever it was, that I would have probably ended up a middle linebacker. I know Dick Butkus, and he kids me about that on occasion. I don't see him too often anymore, but 10 years ago, back before he became a famous movie star, I managed to see him once in a while. It was interesting, back then people called him Csonka. Now people ask me if I'm Butkus. That bothers me.
Larry Csonka, Dick Butkus, and the rest can be compared to each other, but few others. Every time these men stepped onto a football field, it was crunch time.